What's going on, Anthony? Are you MAGA?
Yeah, I am, Dean.
Okay, what about you, Cads?
I am not, but I do want to ask you, what's your opinion?
I'm sorry, but I gotta kick you. Not only are you not MAGA, but you're also Chad. Okay, take it away, man. Tell us why you're MAGA.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I guess before you do, also, Isaiah, thank you for the $10 over on PayPal. I read your message there. I'll check your DMs. I appreciate you so much for the love, Isaiah. As well as Lion of God with the $10. Just for fun. Thank you for the love, Lion of God. Shout out to Isaiah and Lion. Okay, take it away. Why are you MAGA?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, analyzing the past candidates, past election, I think that Trump's agenda more aligns closely with my, I guess, general opinions and philosophy for the country. I tend to prefer his economic approach to Harris's economic approach when proposed prior to the election.
Yeah, what about now?
Also, just have more confidence. Yeah,
What about now?
currently.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll just be transparent. I'm a college student. I'm 21. I'm studying quant econ, and most of my professors are like pretty anti-tariff, right? Most of them adhere to a lot of classical economic principles. So it's certainly an interesting perspective to really talk about, how you can justify tariffs as someone who's more of kind of a free enterpriser.
I got it.
Yeah.
Okay, here's my idea. You don't even
Sure.
need a degree in economics, which by the way is really cool.
No, I just wanted to
You're
give some background.
You're
I don't-
gonna
you
you're gonna
definitely don't
grow
need a
up
degree.
and you're gonna make a shit ton of money in your future. You're gonna be a very very rich man if you're gonna go into quant, dude. Holy shit! Oh my god, people in quant econ make so much money. What is the average like salary in your career?
I mean, if you're going into quant trading, which I don't plan on doing, but it's something crazy starting like 25,000 a month or something.
Yeah, good for you, bro. Good for you. But anyways,
But no, regardless though.
yeah.
So
Anyways, let me just run my point here real quick. So I don't even think that you need a degree in quant econ in order to understand that Donald Trump's economic policy right now is bad for this reason. Okay, the Center on American I forgot the name. Oh, there it is. The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities tells us that his big beautiful bill in Congress right now is going to reduce the after-tax income for the bottom 80% of income earners in this country, and it's going to cost $3.8 trillion. I think that reducing your income and spending $4 trillion to do it is a very obviously poor economic proposal.
no, sure, yeah. I mean, but looking at, Harris proposed an unrealized gain tax, which I guess for those who don't know what that is, that's proposing taxing your gain on an investment that you're not selling yet, right? So, like, let's say you buy a stock right now and you sell it, you're taxed on that, but prior to that, any growth on that investment isn't taxed. And that sort of concept really can shake up the market, and it's never been done before in the U.S.
So she didn't. I don't blame you for thinking that she did, because so did I for a handful of months. But that was propaganda. She actually didn't. It was nowhere on her
Okay.
economic agenda. It was nowhere on her policies. It was nowhere listed on the issues section of her website. Now, Biden supported an unrealized gains tax. However, she did not in the economic policy she provided.
Got it. Understood. And I'll take that. I'm mistaken on that. Regardless, though, with the big beautiful bill analysis that you brought up, right? That's like it's basically, and I think this is important to recognize. And if you're going to shoot me on this for this being a terrible argument, it really is just a prediction, right? And both sides are trying to approach legislation with trying to create economic growth, right? And continuing the corporate tax cuts that Trump initially put in place, while it maybe partially, has to do with trickle down from the Reagan era, that's an attempt to make the economy better, right? So the analysis saying that, and funny enough, earlier you were saying that it would actually increase taxes, but then you clarified that by saying it would just lower post-tax income. It's basically a certain center doing an analysis, with the theories they're attached to, right? It's not what actually is going to be carried out at the end of the day.
You don't know that. In fact, I would say that we do not have a better idea of what will be carried out if the big beautiful bill were to be passed than what the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities has reported to us. Because at the end of the day, you and me right now are debating the efficacy of his proposed economic policy. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
but
we won't
because
know.
now
Yes.
just listen, because the big beautiful bill has not passed yet, we could only debate the efficacy off of projections. Correct?
Yes.
Right,
Now,
right. Now, if we are to have a debate about the projections of his economic policy, simply saying that, well, my argument is a projection of his economic policy is not a valid critique, because any argument that you could give about the efficacy of the projections of the economic policy will be a projection as well, right? So we could just merely debate what the most appropriate projections are, right? And I think that the projections that we see from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities are going to be the most appropriate projections due to the fucking surplus of evidence and reason they provided for their projections. If you'd like to read their official report that indicates the conclusion that I gave you, please go to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities website, and it will be the very top thing on their website. Now, I would like to also denote that it reducing the after-tax income for 80% of Americans is not the only bad part of the BBB. The fact that it's going to cost $4 trillion is another very bad part of the BBB. This is why Elon Musk, Donald Trump's right-hand man, the richest man in the world, has now left the Trump administration and called the Big Beautiful Bill a disgusting abomination. And he has now been lobbying for all congressmen and women in the Senate to not let it pass, and has been telling every American, right or left-leaning, to call their representatives and tell them to vote against the BBB, right? So, I mean, this is a bipartisan push from everyone with a brain. Regardless if they're on the right or on the left, everyone with a brain is saying that the Big Beautiful Bill is terrible. So I think you actually have quite the mountain to climb in justifying that it will be good economic policy.
Sure, yeah, and it's having a very hard time passing the Senate, even from GOP lawmakers, and I will completely acknowledge that at the end of the day. It's more so that, and it's not that I'm this big, beautiful bill proponent at the end of the day. It's that when analyzing two candidates, I thought that Trump would be better. For example, when he passed his initial round of corporate tax cuts, the economy was actually better post those tax cuts. Is there a direct correlation? No. Could you attribute some of it to those tax cuts? Sure.
How much GDP growth per year can we attribute to his original round of tax cuts in 2017?
Sure. I don't know off the top of my head, unfortunately.
I do. Two Harvard economists, one right-leaning, one left-leaning, did a study. You could find it on Google. It's titled The Macroeconomic Impacts of the 2017 Tax Reform Bill. It's 32 pages long. It's a beautiful study. They only attributed 0.04% growth in the American GDP per year to his first round of tax cuts. Now, that's around $40 to $60 billion. Typically, for every $1 billion that is generated in our GDP, our government, takes away $300 million from government revenue. So, in other words, it's only going to generate around what is that? Like $25 billion per year in government revenue, but it cost almost $2 trillion to sign it into law in the first place. So it generated very marginal growth in the American GDP, and it had very marginal return insofar as additional government revenue. So I would actually argue that we cannot attribute vast economic expansion to his original round of tax cuts in 2017.
No, I do understand that, yeah. I just have a question. Was the analysis done... Do you know what the term was in terms of how many years post the tax cuts? Was it like 5, 6, or was it 1 or 2? And the only reason I bring it up is, was COVID accounted for in that analysis?
Yeah, so they accounted for COVID in the analysis, and the analysis. You stop me, man. I'd have to look at the research paper myself.
No, you're good. You're good. Because the thing is,
I'd have to look at the research paper
both Biden
myself
and Trump so in Trump's first term and Biden's term, most of the economic, I guess, analysis for the second half of Trump's first term and the first half of Biden's term, a lot of it really had to do with COVID, how it was stunted, right? So I'll give, leeway to both presidents.
But I will say,
it's very hard to do analysis on, were certain policies effective given just the scale of the pandemic and how unusual it was.
I will say, I will say, I'm willing to accept your claim, because all that your claim means is that you can't attribute vast economic expansion to the bill. Either we essentially have to remain agnostic on its overall impacts, which means we should ignore it in a conversation about its economic policy for the second administration. But I will say, though, one critique is that the purpose of the economic analysis done by those two Harvard professors was to isolate for all external impacts on the American economy, including things such as COVID. That's an external variable, and to just evaluate the reformation in our federal tax code as set forth by his first round of tax cuts to see what impact it would yield. His saying that it's really hard to do economic evaluations on the outcome of economic policy in the latter half of Donald Trump's first term and in the first half of Biden because of the pandemic, meaning that we'll just kind of ignore it, right? And if we ignore it, it means that you can't use it to generate a claim that somehow he's proven a demonstrable track record of good economic performance as generated by his policy.
Yeah, no, I understand that and I appreciate that. So with that all said, from a theoretical approach, I happen to agree more with Trump's proposed economic plans because of their ability to allow for more free enterprise and free market forces to exist. And that's just out of
so you're
theoretical
pro-free
approach,
market.
right?
You're pro-free market. So am I. So am I. So am I. So am I. Now I think that
You're going to bring up the tariffs, aren't you?
obviously, but I mean, like,
Yeah.
I think that it's probably important for us to like first recognize that, like, okay, I would say like further restricting the after-tax income of 80% of the consumers in the market is definitely like a huge fucking restriction on the market, right?
Well, that's the thing, though. It's assuming that there's going to be less income generated, right? It's not a restriction
Yeah,
based
it's a
on
restriction of the market
potentially-
by reducing the after-tax income of these people.
Okay, I'm not trying to nitpick here, but it's not a restriction if you're cutting taxes. Like taxes inherently are a restriction.
So the
analysis is
so the claim is that it's increasing taxes.
the big beautiful bill. No. It's cutting taxes or continuing to keep taxes at the lower rate rather than them increasing.
Yeah. But the claim that the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities makes is that it's effectively increasing taxes to reduce the.
I
after-tax
know,
income.
but the thing with that is, and it's the same thing as Harris saying there would be a sales tax through tariffs, right? And I hate to use this word, but it really is just semantics. There might be less money in your pocket, but it's not from the form of a tax,
Okay,
right? And that is an
are
important
you
distinction.
arguing that okay, so I understand what you're saying. You're basically saying like maybe the evaluation of the big beautiful bill, like like delineated that they'd have lower after tax income, maybe because of like their cuts to Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare, or like other like unrelated things to the literal federal tax code that would aid and abet in a reduction of their after tax income. Well, I would agree that if you are right, it will have the same impact in reality. It will effectively do the same thing, meaning that it would effectively further restrict the market. But I think it's also possible that what the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities is arguing is that they are literally increasing the taxes given the federal tax code for 80% of income earners. But I'm okay to just theoretically concede to your claim because then it's just effectively further restricting the market of consumers by reducing their after-tax income. But I mean, like,
Yes.
generally, I bet that we could agree that it's like immoral to do a redistribution of wealth from the poor to the rich.
You said immoral,
Yeah.
but is that what you think's going on?
Yeah.
Because the thing is this, right? So we have it's not erasing the progressive tax system we have in the states currently, right?
It's impacting it negatively. Like, sure, like, man, if we were to increase the taxes on the bottom 20% of income earners by 10%, and then we reduce the effective tax rate of top 1% earners by 10%, okay, we would still have a progressive tax code because like top 1% earners would still technically be paying more proportionally, okay? But that doesn't mean that it's not a negative impact, right?
No, I understand that, but my question for you is this: it has to do with corporations and how they're being taxed, not actually individuals' income tax, right?
So I just want to clarify that
it's
you don't care that like there's a massive redistribution of wealth that's going to be onset by the BBP if it passes to redistribute wealth from the poor to the rich.
No. So that's not what I'm saying. What I'm
Okay, so
trying to
what is
get
your
at
thoughts
is,
on that?
right?
Like, I guess, what are your thoughts on the fact that it's going to redistribute wealth from the poor to the rich?
Well, if that's what you're taking away from the analysis, then I would say that's inherently problematic. That's not what I take away from it. And the
why?
reason I say that
Do you have an
is because-
analysis from like something other than the Center on Budget and Policy
No.
Priorities
So
that indicates
this is
to
what
you
I'll
they're
say,
saying
right?
is wrong?
Is the proposed tax cuts in the big beautiful bill cutting taxes directly on the income earned by the top 1% of individual income earners?
Wait, I just want you to answer my question because you said that you disagree with the analysis. Does this mean that you have a differing analysis?
No, I do not.
Okay, so then why would you disagree with it?
No. This is the thing. And I'm not trying to make you answer my question first because you don't have to. But what I really think is the important distinction is it's not about individual taxes, right? From a federal level, right? Like if you make over, what is it, $400 or it's $500,000
I
a year
just want to
around
clear
there?
this up. I'm afraid that we're like getting into a very messy debate. Once again,
Okay.
I want to be clear in the question that I'm asking you. The
Sure.
Center on Budget and Policy Priorities indicates that the overall impact of all 3,000 pages of the big beautiful bill is as follows. It will increase the after-tax income for members of the top 1% by $25,000 per year, and it will increase on average the after-tax income of top 20% earners by $500 per year. Meanwhile, it would decrease the after-tax income for the bottom 80% of income earners, impacting the bottom 20% of income earners the most by reducing their after-tax income by $2,200 per year. Now, this is an effective wealth redistribution from the poor to the rich, all right? And I want your thoughts here. Is this good?
Okay.
Is this bad? Do you agree with what they're saying? Or do you disagree with what
So,
they're saying?
no. I agree with what they're saying. I will admit there is no other better analysis out there. Do I support the current rendition of the big beautiful bill? No. Do I still support Trump? Yes.
Why?
Right? Okay. Please don't think this is a straw man. I'm not trying to change the subject. I do think this is important to bring up. I support the Doge movement. I think worrying about government spending and the ballooning deficit is extremely important in the Trump administration with Elon to help initially. Why I think he's gone right now, I think it's a different discussion. I think it's for bad for antics, to be honest. But the bottom line is I do think that the Doge was a good initiative, is a good initiative, and worrying about the deficit is very important. And the big, beautiful bill actually conflicts with that belief right now. So I would not support the current big, beautiful bill proposal.
Okay, I agree with you. I would also support an initiative to keep a closer eye on where government is spending money. I agree that a ballooning federal debt and deficit is a bad thing, and any initiative to reduce that can be a good thing if run properly. Okay, right? So for the purpose of my next position, we are going to assume that Elon was running it properly, and every dollar cut by Elon was truly unnecessary. I'm going to grant that for the debate, even though I don't actually believe that to be true. So now that I've granted that for the debate, and we're assuming that every dollar cut by Elon was cut properly and it truly was wasteful, still yet, you should have supported Kamala Harris in the context of a ballooning debt and deficit, because although she didn't support a Doge initiative, all things considered, she would have added less debt at the end of the day, at the end of the year, at the end of financial quarters, compared to Donald Trump, okay? Because as you just agreed, Donald Trump undermines the efforts of Doge by spending significantly more than they're cutting, right? And even Elon Musk said this. Elon Musk has said that Donald Trump is undermining Doge. Yes, and fun fact, big, beautiful bill, $3.8 trillion in debt-related spending. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. That is almost twice as much as every dollar spent on non-COVID-related expenditure by Biden and Harris in the last fucking 4 years. And Donald Trump is spending almost twice as much with one bill in the first 150 days in office. And if we look at his first administration and compare it to Biden and Harris's term, he spent $8.6 trillion and they spent $4.6 trillion. If you account for COVID, he spent $4.8 trillion and they spent $2.2 trillion. So if your main issue was a was an exploding debt deficit, then your pick would have been Kamala Harris, as she would have been viewed as the lesser of two evils within this respect.
Now, this is a thing, though. The actual bill has projections, for tariff revenue, right? Now, whether or not you agree with those projections, that's what it's based off of, right? And at the end of the day, Donald Trump, in his second term, right, in his campaign for his second term, really ran on a campaign that was centered around tariff revenue.
Okay, well, tariff revenue wouldn't be debt.
It would not be debt. Yeah, so I'm saying
why are we talking about it? Because I thought that we were having a conversation about who's better for the debt.
No, I know. I'm saying is if you're increasing tariff revenue and you're increasing debt, then at the end of the day, it's net, and the spending they're increasing, they deem as necessary to continue tax cuts to allow the economy to grow greater. Now, with the analysis you brought up earlier, they projected it wouldn't with the current rendition of the bill, but I would assume by the time it gets through the Senate, if it even does, probably it wouldn't include that.
Wait, I have a question. Does Donald Trump support the bill as it is in its current rendition?
Currently in his rendition, I believe he supports it.
Okay,
yes.
so then you also can see that Donald Trump supports reckless, wasteful expenditure that Kamala Harris didn't.
Well, it's not reckless and wasteful in his interpretation because of the tariff revenue. I mean, that is true.
Wait. Does a big, beautiful bill include tariffs?
It has projected tariff revenue, and it's in line with what his administration is doing currently, right?
Wait. There's projected tariff revenue in the big, beautiful bill? Wait.
It acknowledges it.
It acknowledges it?
Yes.
Okay, what does that mean?
What I mean is the bill does propose currently that it's going to increase spending in certain areas because it's increased deficit spending.
Is it going to spend any money on like implementing tariffs or anything?
What it does say is that with the tariffs that the Trump administration has imposed and proposes to further impose, that revenue would essentially pay for the increase in spending.
The revenue would pay for the
deficit would be net.
Okay. Oh yeah. What is the projected income from tariffs in the next 4 years? How about the next 10 years?
I know. I don't have it off the top of my head. You'd have to.
No, you got to be able because you got a huge fucking burden here. You got a huge burden because if he's willing to sign $3.8 trillion of debt-related spending, and with one bill in his first 150 days in office, in his last 4 years, he added $8.6 trillion of debt-related spending. Holy shit! Those tariffs would have to generate like $10 trillion in revenue over the course of the next 10 years. Not to mention, inevitably, it's the American consumer that pays that tariff, meaning that A, I think it's outlandish to assume that his tariffs would be able to pay for his spending, and B, even if they do, that just means that the average American is going to be paying a higher effective tax rate. And I think that an administration with spending that is acknowledged and paid for by an increase in the corporate tax rate is going to be better than an administration with spending that is not acknowledged and paid for by the average everyday American, right? But I think the next step is you demonstrating that your claim is true by informing me and everybody else watching what the expected and projected tariff revenue will be in the next 10 years from the tariffs implemented by the Trump administration.
Yeah, listen, if you want me to hop off and look it up and hop back on, I'm happy to do that. I mean, at the end of the day, I'll admit, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. I do know that in what I was reading about the beautiful bill is that they did list the projections and they justify the increase in spending through those projections. I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head. So that's kind of, that's where I stand there. I'm happy to go to a different aspect of Trump's agenda or keep talking about economic issues, or you can move on to another guest, but that's kind of where we're at right now.
Bro, listen, I appreciate you for the good conversation. I don't get many of these. Let's see. So, I don't know.
You want to talk about education reform?
Education reform. Do you support? Well, I mean, like I'm
a
guessing
huge
that like the
proponent of
education
school choice.
So, school choice. I mean, I don't know. It's like a super big deal related to the Trump administration. Do you mind if I ask you a question?
Sure.
Okay. Let's see here. So I think that America is in a constitutional crisis because Donald Trump has no respect for the American Constitution. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think it's a media scare tactic at the end of the day to talk about our democracy being basically under attack in this constitutional crisis concept. I mean, can you give me some examples of why you would think that we're in quotes, constitutional crisis?
For sure. Do you mind if I go back to 2020 for my first example?
Sure.
Okay, so in 2020, he tried to silence the voice and the vote of every American citizen when he tried to steal the election from Biden. He tried to steal the election by sending fake slates of electorates to 7 states that Biden won, and he sent them with fake ballots of ascertainment from those states stating that he won, and then he directed them to send those fake votes back to Congress, and then he pressured Mike Pence to certify them as real. What this means is that if Mike Pence listened to Donald Trump's command, Donald Trump would have been president for the last 4 years, as he would have been officially inaugurated and appointed by Congress due to those fake votes. Okay, that would have absolutely undermined our civil and electoral processes and been in violation of the Constitution and been the largest attack on our democracy since the Civil War. Do you want to start there and respond to that, or would you like me to continue to name off times Donald Trump has violated the Constitution and set forth an unprecedented precedent of a threat and attack on our Constitution?
Yeah, I mean, I can address that. So listen, at the end of the day, I guess the reason why I came on this call and to talk about why I support Trump is when it comes to who I thought was better for this election. I'm not trying to dismiss your claim there. I think it was a very messy time, especially in terms of being a Trump supporter post the 2020 election. I think the administration, I guess if they're just focusing on doing due diligence and making sure that, the election was sound, that's one thing. I mean, to the extent it was probably brought, and, I wouldn't even support his claims on, Mike Pence and telling him to overturn it. January 6th was definitely a very embarrassing time. As someone who identifies as conservative, I did not support what went on during that time. But I guess if you'd be willing to talk more about, I'd be interested to hear your opinion on what the constitutional crisis is during his current administration, whether that has to do with maybe like visa termination or deporting of migrants. I mean, I'd be interested to hear on that.
Okay. Well, I guess before we move on from 2020, like with all due respect, I did ask you if I could bring up 2020 and you said yes. Okay,
Yeah.
So that's the reason why I brought it up. So, I mean, I just like kind of described to you how, he did totally launch the largest internal attack on the American democracy since the Civil War. And you seem to not really give it much pushback. You just said that you want to talk about other things because
I don't understand why we're in a constitutional crisis because of something he did in 2020 when he didn't get elected.
Well, sure, because we've seen him continue to do similar things to what he did in 2020 in disrespect of the Constitution since. But I would like to clarify here. My question is, you said that, it's just kind of a media scare tactic. Well, when this happened in 2020 and all the medias were all the left-leaning medias reported that we're in this constitutional crisis, he's been undermining our democracy. This is absolutely abysmal and terrible. Can we agree that that was not a media scare tactic? And if what I'm saying is true, it was just a resemblance of fact.
Yep.
Fucking perfect. Okay, so now you've got your foot in the door into acknowledging and understanding why I think that he's onset a constitutional crisis. The first step is him launching the largest internal attack on the American democracy since the Civil War. Well, the next step is his explicit call for the termination of the Constitution in December of 2022, once he failed in that initial attack on our civil and electoral processes, baby rage, and just said the Constitution should be thrown out the window.
Well, listen. At the end of the day, I'm not going to sit here and be able to defend this sort of thing. Trump has all sorts of shit tweets or shit X posts all the time. I don't think that changes my opinion on why I thought he was a better candidate.
Does it change your opinion on how you think it's just like this media nonsense that people are saying he's put America into a constitutional crisis?
Well, regardless, let's say.
Wait, not
right?
regardless. I want you to like directly answer that question. Not regardless of that question. What is the response to that question?
I still think, and this could, be on both sides with conservative criticism of Biden. The media is going to say things, and this is even the right-wing media, that's going to get attention, going to get views, and going to be a scare tactic, right? The left-wing media really liked to hate on Elon Musk when the time he was working in Doge, right? That's honestly, in my interpretation, why the Trump administration pushed him out, because he kind of became the boogeyman of the Trump administration.
I'm sorry.
But at the end of the day, it's just really just a media tactic, and it's not really changing my opinion on why.
But I'm denying that. So it would only be this baseless media tactic to accuse Donald Trump of pushing America into a constitutional crisis if he wasn't pushing America into a constitutional crisis. And I'm giving you good reason to believe he was. You conceded on the largest internal attack on the democracy when he tried to steal the election from Biden. That was one step in the door. I'm asking you to take the second step. So when left-leaning media said that he was ushering America into a constitutional crisis, when he explicitly called for the termination of the Constitution in December of 2022, was that false reporting, or was that just another resemblant of fact if what I'm saying is true?
No, I never said it was false reporting. When I say a scare tactic, I don't think it's false reporting. I think it's manipulated reporting or targeted reporting.
So then how is it manipulative for America to say that Donald Trump is sending us into a constitutional crisis when he's actually sending us into a constitutional crisis? I thought that manipulation would inherently imply some omission of truth, omission of fact, explicit lie. But when they're just calling the shots as they are, he's sending us into a constitutional crisis because he tried to rig the election. When he failed, he called for the explicit termination of the Constitution. I'd say that this is no longer manipulation. This is not lying. This is not hiding the truth. This is just simply reporting the truth.
Well, I'll tell you this. I guess in the context of 2020, Trump thought the election was stolen from him, right? Now, you could say that he made that up, but if he genuinely thought that and he was trying to make sure that the votes were counted properly and whatnot, that's really what was, I guess, promoting most of those lawsuits and most of those
I don't think it matters that he thought he was justified. Think about it this way. Because
you could say that the Biden administration
listen,
putting us into a constitutional crisis.
Listen, okay, I don't think that's the case, but we'll get there. So you're basically saying that he wasn't ushering in an issue because he thought he was justified. I reject that. So imagine that I'm just fucking insane. I am just not in alignment with reality. I'm a delusional old man, and I think that every other American is out to kill me. Okay? So does this mean that if I therefore turn around and try to kill every other American, that I haven't onset a humanitarian crisis since I think I'm justified?
No.
Right. So then even if I accept that Donald Trump thought he was justified in trying to throw the Constitution out the window and steal and rig the election from Biden, it doesn't fucking matter because he was wrong.
But did he try, or did he tweet that he was frustrated and then made an offhand comment about it? What I'm trying to get
at he literally sent the fake slates of electors to the 7 key swing states that Biden won. He literally sent those fake slates.
But that wasn't throwing out the Constitution. That's a different tweet, right? So
that wasn't a tweet. That was an actual action to completely ignore the voice and the vote of the people. And if these actions had led to Mike Pence inevitably accepting the fake votes, which Mike Pence denied to do, then he would have been president for the last 4 years against the voice and the vote of the people. That is an active intention, an attempt to rig and steal a presidential election.
Okay,
it wasn't just a tweet. That was an action.
So from that action 4 years ago, you still think we're in a constitutional crisis now?
Yeah.
And
because the same motivations that led him to trying to steal the election in 2020 was just the fact that he's willing to try to do whatever it takes to garner as much power, support, and control as possible. That's why he then later tweeted out in December of 2022 that he wants to throw the Constitution out the window. And that's why now, under this term, he's violated the constitutional rights and human rights of people like Abrigo Garcia when he illegally deported him to CIGOT, violated the constitutional rights of 2 plane loads of Venezuelan immigrants. He left. No, wow. That guy was decent too. Oh man, I'm sad. That was my first challenge of the day.